All right, so I just want to show you how to fill out this sculpture a little bit more. So this is the sculpture of Mia, and you can see that I've started to put more flesh on here. I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, her real gesture now. So I started to put things in, but now I've started to really mass in more of her volumes. Okay, so she's not as like kind of like limited in the amount of gesture that she has. Mia's got a ton of gesture, so we're trying to create more of these outer movements out like that, more dramatic angles. So I put more in her abdominal area, and then also some more in her glutes. Okay, and then you can also see here where this starts to swing back. I'm going to start using snakes of clay. I noticed some of you guys have been putting more balls of clay. Try to do longer pieces, especially for longer areas, and then small little balls for, let's say, tiny areas. Okay. And then I'm just going to keep moving this gesture out a little bit more, so it's much more like the actual model. So I know that some of you guys working too thin has been confusing. So when it's just too confusing, add a little bit more, so you can really create more of the real outline that you see that the model is creating. Okay. So once again, what I find that really helps is that you're thinking about where the outermost point, once again, so when you add more clay, so you see how I've built up more, I'm still going over the areas that were the high points. Okay, so the high points, the outermost points, which create the contour, right? So I'm doing the same thing here, just pulling it out a touch more, and then it's going to be much more the actual gesture that I want. Okay, so now that we've got this, I'm going to start putting her the rest of her her in here. Okay, and I'm seeing that her C7 looks a touch backwards, so I'm gonna use a tool to draw. So I see that a bunch of you are not using drawing enough. Okay, so drawing is meant to be a tool for you. And I know it's sculpture, it seems like you don't have to draw, but this is really gonna help. So C7 is back here. Okay. So I'm gonna swing this in here. Okay. All right, so there we go. Okay. So now I'm starting to actually create these volumes, which are much more like Mia. So this area right here, okay, we're going to start here in the pelvis, okay? It's kind of like this form, if you think about it, there's the fat pad in the pubic area, which has the fat pad of the thigh area meeting up against it. So it's pressing against it, okay? So when you put the clay here, you're thinking it's almost like pillowing out, okay? So you see how I'm using the tool to roll, okay? I like to use my tool to roll clay in, because then you can actually control the direction at which you roll the tool, okay? When you're wiping, okay, the tendency is for the clay to just kind of, you're not as conscious of where you're putting the clay. So here you can see I'm rolling it, okay, so that I can see and feel. The point is that you feel what you're doing as you're watching it, okay? So when you're putting the clay onto the tool, you do this. Like that. So you roll like this and then in like that, okay? So that should help you feel like you have more control over the material. Okay. Because right now, another thing that you guys are dealing with is that you still have yet to learn how to work with the clay. So you see, I put a big chunk of clay here, right? And then roll it. So you're patting it down and rolling it down too. Okay, so you see. See how that form is? Okay, so it's quite poofy right now. It may not necessarily be so. So I'm going to turn my head to see what this area is like. And then I'm going to look at the sculpture. So I have to have my head like right in front of the sculpture and then looking downwards. Okay, looking downwards at it. So let me see. You can see me looking at it. So it's like this. So I'll be looking like this. And then looking over at the model. So I see that this deep V here. So this is like super, super deep, right? It's actually more shallow. So I'm going to change this. I'm pushing this in so that from above it looks more like a shallow V as opposed to, whoops, I'm pushing this inwards. So it looks more like a shallow V than a really deep and pointy V. Okay. Let me show you. So it's this area right here. So right here, this is what I've been talking about. It's more of a shallow V. So I just actually flattened it out more. Okay. All right. So here we've got this. And then I'm going to put this here. And then here. So I'm covering this armature right now because I know that the hand is going to be sculpted on top of there. Now I'm just trying to get what's going on here in the abdomen. So so Mia has pretty tight, like a really tight belly button. It's like way up here. In other models, so her belly button is around way up here. Most models would actually have theirs down here at this level. So so I'm just thinking about how the flesh here, all right, where her abdominals are tightening up. So you're going to use the clay here. And I'm imagining that the abdominals are tightening up against here. They're getting taut. Okay, it's like they're being pulled there. So we're going to get them tight there. And then the rib cage is going to be here. Okay, so we're just fleshing this all out so that it looks more and more human. Okay, not so inhuman. Okay, and you're seeing how this is really looking more like a real hip. Okay. Now I'm going to put some flesh here as well. And this is around where the bathing suit. So the bathing suit. So what you want to do is draw. You're going to draw where the bathing suit is. Okay, I'm not sure about the height of that. I got to really check it first, but we'll put that there tentatively. Her belly button, let's see. So when I want to get her belly button, I can actually take a tool and angle it from the pelvic point to where the belly button is, and then you can get that angle very easily. So let me just do that right now. Oop. Okay. Yeah, it's around here. That's around where we're seeing the belly button, okay? All right. So from this belly button, let me put this here. Okay, so from that belly button, I'm going to start thinking about where the bathing suit is in comparison to that. So the bathing suit's definitely lower. It's like here. Okay, some of you may have too many like bumps of clay. So you may want to just for your eye to feel, you know, more relaxed. So if you're like sculpting more this final stage, you want to roll. If you want to just go quickly to very quickly smooth things out so you can see the form better, you can wipe the clay with the tool. Okay, so wiping for fast stuff and then rolling for more precise stuff. Okay, with precise movements. So here we've got the roll of skin that forms underneath the bathing suit. Okay. So if you look at this handout right here, you're going to see that the flesh moves in here and then the rib cage starts to move out. Okay, so this is an angle inwards from the hip, moving inwards to the waist, and then the rib cage comes out. Okay, so when you look at the reference photo of Mia, you're thinking about how the flesh moves inwards here and then back out. Okay, especially in this widest point of the rib cage. So widest point of the rib cage being at the lower part. Okay. And then dimensionally, it's actually like not as wide here as it is up here, but you'll see that there's this volume here. You got to imagine that it's there. So here, and you can kind of see it. You see that movement in here, goes in here, and then the flesh of the abdomen is going beyond the rib cage. So the rib cage is here, and then the flesh of the abdomen moves out. Okay, and then it meets the pubic bone down there. So, so here we go. All right, so I'm going to create that rib cage feeling. All right. And then the flesh that is compressed here. Okay, let me get the back view. Okay. Okay, so the back view. All right, so the back view. So you saw how I drew where the bathing suit is around here, right? So I got to recheck everything. So we've got we've got the pelvic points here, and I see my drawing is here. I'm seeing that it actually could angle down a little bit more. So I'm going to change that drawing. And then, so that's going to help me with that. Okay. And then you're going to draw where all these other spaces are. You see how on Mia, you see that line, that crease? Okay. And then you see another crease. You see the light area where her scapula is. Okay. So you want to draw all those areas in. Okay, once you've got your overall gesture down, and you can ask me if you think it's ready, right? You want to draw in where all these placements of all these body parts are. So I just did a generic drawing. Now I'm going to just double check. So you always got to double check everything. Okay, so. All right, so you see where I have the mark for the C7? You can literally think of it as like a triangle. So from this point to that point to that point, and the points are also marked on the model, on the model too. You can figure out if this is the right kind of triangular shape. And I'm seeing that it's definitely not. Definitely needs to move out more. Okay, so you can really just look at this as an independent shape in and of itself. So from here, and then you can go from point to point, okay? And always this shape is in the context of the whole. Okay, so smaller shapes are, you always have to blur your eyes, step back, step far away, and then double check whether if the smaller parts are fitting within the whole. Okay. So proportion, that's something that you're just gonna have to develop over the years. I say it's best to work in the way that I've been showing you, at least in the beginning, so that you start to pinpoint at where things change, okay? The exact placement of a directional change in a line or in a plane, depending on what you're working with. And looking at the overall shape, overall proportions, okay, and comparing them. A really easy exercise is actually to draw a line on a piece of paper and try to reproduce the exact inclination and length and width of that line. So you draw a diagonal line on a piece of paper, tape it to a wall or put it on, you have it on your easel, and then reproduce that line absolutely perfectly. I've had students that did it, and it could take them 40 minutes to get it right. You'd be shocked. Okay, but to really get it precisely, that's what it takes. Okay, so this shape of this pelvis right here is not continuing the way that I would like it to. It actually needs to be all the way up here. So I'm going to add this form here. So the pelvic girdle is actually up higher than where I put it here. So you are learning how to self-correct as you work. And that's why I keep saying you have to observe again and again. When you presume that everything is correct, that is when you get farther behind. Unfortunately, it's not a thing to be lazy about. You have to be very, very aware of what you're doing and rechecking everything. You know, you don't presume anything. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going about it slowly. So there's this shape here. It's like that. And then of course the glutes, we are not really quite sure everything that's going on in here, but there's a compression that occurs here. So the shape here is much more like a pinched sphere. So the sphere is pinched here. So the fat pad here at the glutes is falling downwards, falling down, and yet it's also pinched because this leg is pulling, it's pulling backwards. So the flesh here gets pinched in between. Okay. Well, that's what creates that kind of shape. Now, let's move into, let's sculpt a little bit this area right here. So this area of the pelvis is, it's like a triangle. All right, so the sacrum is this triangle. And I know that it's not very easy to understand. Without actually seeing it on the model directly, but essentially what it is that you've got this pelvis here. Okay, you've got this pelvis here. So they're the two pelvic points right here. And then this right here is actually where you see a shadow line. You're going to see a shadow line. And then here, the skin kind of poofs around, all right? And then there's a little shadow here. So here to here, and then also there's going to be a crease up here. So it's kind of like a diamond. It's kind of like a diamond, but the flatter top up here, okay? So, so this is going to be in shadow, and this is going to seem a little bit poofier as it meets the pelvic points. Okay. So from here to up there. So it's moving upwards and this in this direction. That like this way in a diagonal up to meet where the pelvic points are. Okay. And then just remember that on the those announced female at birth or high estrogen body types, you're going to get fat pad. You're going to get fat pad over this ridge of the iliac crest. Okay. All right, so here we go. All right. So this spine area is going to be, it's going to have a certain depth to it. Okay. So just remember that the spine area is subcutaneous. The spines of the vertebrae, of the individual vertebrae are subcutaneous. So when she's pulling back like that, this will be a deeper area. So I want you to try feeling your own back, feel it around here, tip your rib cage so that it's like this. You know, you do some duck butt and then stick your rib cage forward, okay? And then put your hand right here in that lumbar area, and you will find that it's going to be deep. It's going to be a deeper area. Then you're going to bend forward. You're going to do a forward bend, and then you're going to feel how these spines are going to be sticking outwards. Okay, so remember that your reference points are going to be either your highlights or your deepest shadows on a model. Typically, that is how you can identify them. Okay, so the flesh here is getting compressed. Okay. So I'm just drawing where I see all these various lines that are telling me where form should be. Okay, so this is like, this here is where the bathing suit is here. So the flesh is going to be curving and moving over that, okay? Okay, so I'm gonna keep going here. All right, so this pelvis, like I was describing to you, it's kind of like a diamond here. And you can see where it kind of all becomes uniform up here. And then here, where the sacrum is, you're going to get this kind of poofiness. All right, and since her sacrum is going to be sticking backwards a little bit, she's got more of kind of like a duck butt kind of pelvic position. Okay, we're going to make sure that this is angled back more. So you see this angle right here? It's angled that way, out that way. Okay, now we're going to put the glutes and everything on this side. I'll just see my reference photo. Okay, so, all right. So here we're going to fill this area a bit more. So I'm looking at her from the front to see how symmetrical her rib cage is. All right, now depending on the movement and the pose of the body, the rib cage could be wider on one side and then narrower on the other. But in this case, it's gonna be wider on this side because of the flesh compressing here. All right, which is gonna make it wider. And then, let's see. And then this side is gonna appear less wide. Okay, so we're gonna do that. And then just to make sure, like when you're making this hip area, you wanna be sure that you are really trying to get those shapes of where it is, okay? So here we've got the waist. And it's got a certain line quality to it, so you want to be sure you get that. Okay, and then the armpit area, we're going to get this. We're going to pull this out. So right here, like that. And then you can start to put a little bit more of this abdominal area down. And then just to remember, you need to know what this shape is from above. You need to be able to look at this from above. That way you know exactly, like if it's more of a triangle, if it's more of an egg shape, if it's more of a sphere. But you can't know from the front view. You have to know from looking from above. Okay, so you got to double check all that. All right, so it seems all laborious, but you know, if you take the time to double check all these things, make sure they're really working, what happens is that a new structure starts to form in your mind, in your brain, okay? You start to think in a way that is more three-dimensional, and you'll be able to correlate looking at something from the front with actual volume. And the objective really is that you can think more three-dimensionally, so that when you do your illustrations in your mind's eye, you can start to manipulate body parts and think about the compression of flesh, the stretching out of flesh, hanging down, you know, flesh that's hanging, or if it's contracting, the muscles contracting, and that paired with, you know, the sensation that you know where the skeleton is, you know, that there's actually a skeleton in there, that there's a structure underlying all of this sculpture that will also help you make drawings and paintings and illustrations that are really, really convincing. Okay, so you can see I've kind of filled out this rib cage some more. Okay. And the abdominals, I'm gonna do like this. All right. So my sections of my body are all very clearly delineated. Okay, you want to be sure that you know where everything is, so that when you look at the whole sculpture, you have these nice clear lines, which will tell you where all the various anatomy is. And then you can start to think about, like, look at the whole thing and be like, oh, this thing fits. Like, oh, no, that doesn't fit. Okay. And then that way you can start to think about how all the parts are leading up to this bigger whole. So I just want to place a little, so I want to be sure it's very clear. This head is flat. It's flat here, okay? Like a kind of pancake-like. And then you're just putting where the width of her skull is. Just that, okay? The tendency is to put a big old ball for the head. And we don't want that because it's a smaller part of the sculpture. So, so you're gonna start out with that, and this is gonna act as like your profile, where you're gonna build your profile off of. And then you can add just like a little strip of clay, and that'll start to build up your jawline as well. Okay, and be sure that you've got the orientation of all this all clearly drawn out. And you can draw in a line where you see the center of the eyes being placed, okay? It's actually higher on Mia. Okay. A general rule is that this center line of the eyes is actually in the middle of the entire skull, but because of Mia looking slightly up, it's actually going to be a touch higher, okay? When you look at it from this perspective. So it's all about perspective too, okay? So, so we got more rib cage going, okay? I'm gonna finish this up a little bit. So thinking about how the shape of this rib cage, it's kind of like an egg underneath everything. Okay. All right, so we've got, okay, you see, so I've been just sculpting in this area right here. Okay. Just continuing where that bathing suit is. Now, I gotta recheck everything too. I admit it's not easy to sculpt at a diagonal. So you're gonna have that. And then when you start with things like the scapula, right? So you can see the profile of the scapula from the side here. All right, you can see that right here. And remember how I had you do the one-to-one drawings and like be really precise about exactly where angles change? It's because you see how subtle this area is here, right, of the scapula, okay? This is an angle change right here, and then it goes back out, then it goes back in. At every single angle change, you are actually witnessing the movement of a different bone. Okay, different bone or skin or fat or muscle. That's why you have to be so observant of angle changes, okay? So I'm gonna look for this right here, the placement of this little spot right here, okay? And then now I'm gonna put it onto this sculpture because that's where the tape dot is, okay, on her scapula. I'm gonna pull this out. You know what? I'm thinking this abdomen might be a bit out. Well, it might be okay. All right. Go. Okay. So we've got this out here. Now I'm seeing that things are not where I thought they would be. So I'm seeing that my C7 is way too far back compared to the scapula. So I'm trying to figure out what is wrong. Is this supposed to be here, or is it supposed to be farther forward, or is it supposed to be farther back? So I'm going to just take a look. I'm going to use a plumb line. Okay, double check. Yeah, it's definitely got to move farther forward. So we're going to do this. Now, when you make changes, right, you want to draw first. Make sure your drawing is nice and deep and dark. All right, the original drawing, like that. And then typically, when you make this change in the profile here, now I'm feeling that my armature is actually sticking out. So I'm going to change this as well. I'm going to do this. Move that in and then pull it back. Oh, frick. Okay. All right. So I'm going to follow through with my drawing here. Right here. And then I'm going to cut it away. All right, so when it comes to changing things, when you draw where you observe it to be, the proper place, draw it in, double check it, and then cut. So you want to double check it from all viewpoints to be sure it's really working. Okay. So I'm still not happy with that, so I'm going to squinch that in a bit more. Okay. Okay. All right, so you see how it's developing some more? So now that we've got more of this area, this is starting to look really out of balance. So I'm going to start putting some clay on there. And then once again, I'm thinking about when I'm putting this here, I also have to double check its placement from the front. Okay, so you're going to be looking at highlights. Highlights can sometimes actually fool you, but in general, they're okay. You see, the issue with highlights is that just because there's a highlight doesn't mean it's the outermost point sometimes. Sometimes it's the angle at which it's being, the light is hitting the form. So you always have to double check. Double check, feel that actual area of the body, and you'll be able to tell whether if this is the outermost point or not. Is it closer to the outside of the thigh, or is it closer to the inside? Okay. You can see. Okay, so I'm gonna rotate it, right? So I'm looking from the front, now I'm looking from the side. And being aware of where the pelvic point is. So it's right here. So I'm gonna think about how far the flesh is moving out from that pelvic point. Okay, coming out a little more. Okay, so in general, this area right here is going to be more pointy in this area. Okay, it's going to be a little bit more pointy here. And it's really the above view where you can see that. And then it's going to spread out more as you get down here. So it's kind of like a wedge. Okay. So you see that shape? See how it's like pointier up here and then it's more full here? Okay. So it's more, there's going to be a lobe here for this muscle, this vastus muscle here. Okay. And there's also a fat pad on this side of the knee. Okay. And then it's going to move upwards like a T-top shape, like that. And then here it's going to tighten up a little bit more. Okay. And then as you work on this side, so this is where I actually need to get an armature in. So I'm going to work on this a little bit more and then I'm going to stop so I can put the armature on. That'll be the next video. Okay, and you can see this here. So once again, it's tighter here. It's a little tighter. Okay, so just, you can cup your hand on your thigh and feel this area right here. Feel that shape, and that really helps too. And depending on your body type, you may have to think about, you have to imagine that, like if you're slimmer than Mia, you have to imagine there's a layer of fat. If you're more full body than Mia, then you have to imagine that the forms are a little bit smaller. So it all depends, okay? So we all have to start with our own bodies to understand how what another body is like. But the fortunate thing is that we all have the same components, just arranged differently and maybe taking up more or less different volumes, okay? All right, so I'm gonna stop here.